Senior Project Officer, CARICOM Secretariat. I will be your moderator for today. As we approach the peak months of the 2025 hurricane season, it's critical for farmers and fishers in our communities to prepare for the unexpected. The Caribbean Secretariat, in a proactive and responsive manner, has partnered with the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, Caribbean Agriculture Health and Food Safety Agency, Caribbean Agriculture Research and Development Institute, Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, the Food and Agriculture Organizations for the United Nations, and the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture for these webinars. This is one of 5 webinars, and we look forward to having you share as you can the exciting on these series with others. Today, we're joined by an array of experienced persons and experts who will provide practical information on strategies to prepare for disasters before, during, and after hurricane season. Today, we are focusing on disaster preparedness for on-farm and sea assets. We are looking forward to learning of strategies for protecting farm equipment, boats, and critical infrastructure, and measures for securing input supplies and essential services. We want to get right into it, but before we do, I'd like to do a little housekeeping. For this session, we would like to ask everyone to remain muted. This is a live streamed, and so we would like everyone to be cognizant of that. And we will be taking questions once the time allows us at the end of the segment where we have our presentations. We have 5 presentations today. Each presenter has 5 minutes, and we would like everyone to just remain muted until the time for questions, the question and answer segment. And if you do not want to voice it, you can write it in the chat as well, and we will take the questions there too. So thank you again and welcome. Without any further ado, we'd like to ask our first panelist, Mr. Jervis Rowe from Abbey Gardens. He is an experienced farmer. He's a pioneer in greenhouse and greenhouse technology. He's a known regional consultant, and he's also the owner of Abbey Garden Farms, which started in 1990. He's also the father of the 2023 CARICOM Young Farmer of the Year, Deandra Rowe. We want to welcome him and ask him to know. The time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. And I must say that it is indeed a pleasure for me to be a part of this forum. It touches on a subject that is very close to the minds, thoughts, and body of what we embody here, in Jamaica and within the region, even as we try our utmost best to see towards getting proper food security and of course food safety, amidst the varying setbacks due to climate change. First of all, I must say that I got my invitation lost within the mail, and as such, I was talking to our moderator just probably 2 days ago, and as such, I did not prepare a PowerPoint presentation. So I hope you can still find my discussion helpful as we try to look at some of the things that we need to do as we get ready for this 2025 hurricane season, which I guess everybody in the room knows begins on the 1st of June and probably goes down to, the end of November. The effects of Hurricane Beryl is still fresh in our minds, at Abbey Garden Farm, which is actually owned by my daughter now because I've actually passed the baton on to her over 9 years now, actually. And, we had probably about 90% of our structures impacted. Some, of course, impacted heavier than others, more heavily than others, but overall, we took a big blow. All right, so I was asked to focus today on what are the practical things farmers must do to secure their assets. So from the perspective of greenhouses, I believe that the preparation for your hurricane season actually starts, if you're in this region, it actually starts from the time when you're getting your first greenhouse built. And some of the issues that I have seen is that some of the greenhouses were not built to specifications, and as such, they would have not stood up even before the hurricanes got to category 1. So a lot of them went out from, we're having basically tropical storm winds, while others which were built with far more better integrity, using the right type of material, those stood up much, much better. So for me, that is probably where I'd want to start the discussion about what would you consider to be the proper structure for our environment. I know where my host is. You really don't have hurricanes down that side. I was in Guyana a few months ago and Suriname. And when I spoke about hurricanes, it's as if, those things really don't come your side. But as we know, climate is changing and times are changing. Nevertheless, I believe that all the structures really need to be of a particular integrity. So we recommend construction from metal, although I know that for example, in Guyana and Suriname, Walaba, which I learned down there, is a very, very good, strong wood. And as such, it was very prevalent in your construction, and I had absolutely no reason to think that, those structures would not do well if they are properly engineered based upon how hard I saw those wood were in terms of even getting nails or screws to enter into them. So from that perspective, we just have to build our greenhouses with the right specs. All right, so with our experiences in a more volatile hurricane era, we have discovered that greenhouse roofs that are flat are far more susceptible to damage from hurricanes than those that are dome-shaped or what we call arch or oval-shaped roofs. And incidentally, because our era is so hot, we have to build our greenhouses a little bit taller. I mean, up to the apex of a normal greenhouse would be about 17 feet. The gutter height, in most instances, is going to be probably about 10 to 15 feet tall. And as such, these structures are pretty exposed as they stand quite high from the ground. And as such, the impact of the wind during a hurricane is going to be very, very significant. So from the construction point of view, we really need to have very sturdy structures and built in areas that are not heavily causing them to be heavily affected by the wind. But there's a sort of trap to this thing because our era is hot, we have to build our structures tall. And because our era is hot, we really need to build our structures in places that we can get the wind to help us with what we call passive ventilation. The best position for you to position your greenhouse is in a way that the greenhouse is perpendicular. The length of the greenhouse is perpendicular to the wind flow, which means that the wind for passive ventilation must be hitting the side walls of the greenhouse at 90 degrees. And that probably will cause the most destruction during a hurricane. But in a normal season, that is how your greenhouse would be cooled easiest using passive ventilation. All right, so we have been struck by hurricanes from 2004, 2007, all the way up to 2024. I must admit that we got a good break from 2007. That was Hurricane Dean, and then we had Hurricane Beryl up in last year, and that one was probably one of the most devastating one for our region. Of course, the intensity of the hurricane will vary across the island. Jamaica being somewhat, you could say, a big island, but nothing compared to Suriname and Guyana that I've got the opportunity to visit. All right, so let's move into some of the things that we can do now. Your greenhouse is like a very big kite. So once you remove the covering material, right, just as though if you did not have the covering material on a kite, the kite would not go into the air because there's no lift created by the fabric being on the frame. So once you remove the fabric from the frame and allow the wind to pass through easily, you can now have the ability to save the frame. But of course, if you did not remove the plastic prior to the hurricane and you had to go now and cut the plastic during the hurricane, you'd lose your plastic and probably would not be able to replace it after the hurricane. So what we recommend is to make sure that the structures are built in such a way where the cladding material that be normally your plastic and your netting are installed onto the frame using a locking profile. And there are several types. But what this allows us to do initially is to fit the fabric onto the frame. That is the primary function. And if you select the right type of locking profile, it will also assist you in the event that you have to remove the fabric from the frame for any reason, whether it be maintenance or in preparation for a hurricane. So you need to have your structures having, locking device that you can remove the fabric. All right, so even at our farm, we have solar panels. We have tanks that we use for storage of rainwater because we have no rivers and stream. And as such, we do solar water pumping. So our solar panels had to be strapped down, and in some cases they had to be removed. Of course, all of our water tanks, which are usually plastic water tanks, we had to fill those up prior to the hurricane and make sure that they were on steady ground. There's one thing about filling the tank or the drum, but for example, 1,000 gallon tank of water is going to be almost 10,000 pounds. So if you were to put the tank in an area that is pretty soft and not on a proper plinth or base, then you can probably still lose the tank as well as the contents thereof. And as such, you have to make sure that security and the sturdiness of the spot that you choose for the tank is also taken into consideration, as most hurricanes are going to give you a lot of rain as well as a lot of wind. All right. If you're taking out your power and you have things like your cold storage and other things like that, which probably you might want to run through the period of the hurricane, then you might want to consider a standby generator or something of that sort that will be able to power your cooling, your coolers or your deep freeze or whatever during that for that period. All right, secure all loose items. Anything loose on the farm has to be secured so that you have no projectiles flying around the farm, which could be a problem to you, as well as it could be a problem to the greenhouses or other structures that you have on the farm. For example, I saw in one shoddy installation where they actually had a double vent on a roof, and it was actually the double vent that got loose during the first phase of the hurricane, and it fell into the bottom section of the greenhouse, and that is where most of the damage was sustained. So we have to make sure that everything that is loose is properly secured. It is also good that prior to the hurricane season, you try to stock up on covering materials if it is your intention that immediately after the hurricane you want to get back into production, or if it is the intention that you're going to sit out the entire hurricane season, then you still might have to consider having new covering materials on hand. It is also recommended that you cut all power to areas that are connected to the national grid or otherwise, because you really would not want to have electricity and electrical wires dangling in the rain during a hurricane season. So pretty much you should be able to shut down the farm to some extent for the period of time of the hurricane, which is usually not just a couple of hours. It's not like it's going to be for days. So you have to take that into account. Remove fans and cooling pads. We have just managed to install 4 such units in Jamaica recently. And we're still at the point now thinking how best will we be able to secure, the fans, the extractor fans, horizontal airflow fans, and all the related equipment to this new type of actively cool greenhouses that we just built. And it would be so devastating if we were to lose any of those during this hurricane season. You need to have certain things also on hand, such as your ladders, your scaffolding, all the necessary battery-powered tools, etc., just in case you have to take anything down or you have to remove anything in a very short time. So you need to have those type of tools on hand. If you have seedlings in your nursery, those can be removed and placed within a warehouse if you're fortunate to have a large warehouse on hand. The few hours that the seedlings would not have sufficient light, and if you have artificial light and can power it, then of course you can go ahead and do that. But for the few hours that the seedlings would not have sufficient sunlight, I think they'll be able to survive. Of course, if you have plants in containers like pots or buckets or anything like that, you could also place those into a warehouse or storeroom for the short period of time. And then you could have them easily replaced into the production space within short order. So those who choose to have their greenhouses, as I say, remain intact during the passing of a hurricane, you probably might want to consider having a very long pole with a cutting blade affixed to it. So just in case you had made the wrong decision to not take down your greenhouse and you saw where the winds have picked up sufficiently or where you have been informed via the media that it's going to be a far more intensive system than you had planned for, it might come to a point where you will have to just now go and cut the covering materials, usually the plastic, on top of the roof, just slice it up and allow the wind to pass freely through the greenhouse frame. Incidentally, my daughter and I, we actually did that on one of our greenhouses during Beryl. And when we saw that we had one section which we thought could have been saved, we left that one section saying, okay, let's see if that section would actually stand up. As it turned out, the areas that we cut the plastic were fully intact, and the area that we had just one span that we didn't bother to remove the plastic, that area was totally destroyed. So it is a very, very hard decision to make, because you're thinking about the labor to take down, the damage that is going to be incurred while taking it down, and of course the labor to put it all back together. For example, up by Abbey Garden Farm, the farm is probably near 2 acres of greenhouses, over very hilly terrain, and as such, it's not an easy task to just drive equipment to anywhere on the farm and get all of this done within a matter of time. So your
Eh,
terrain,
th-
and all
Yes.
of that will also
Thank you so
come.
much, Mr. Rowe. You've shared so much very valuable and practical ways. Our time is not on our side right now. So,
Okay.
if you may, let's hear from Miss June Masters. She is the Statistics and Information Analyst at the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism. So, let us hear from her as it relates to the sea assets and preparing for hurricanes for fisheries and the aquaculture sector. Miss June?
Good morning. June Masters from CRFM, Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, and we're all about the fish and the fisheries sector. And this morning, talking about disaster preparedness. And just want to let everybody know that we do have a preparedness plan that we share with our member states. And that plan, it's referred to as the Model Disaster Preparedness Risk and Risk Management Plan for Fisheries and Aquaculture sector of the CRFM member states. And that model plan is available to our member states that they can customize it and use it for their own use in their countries. And most of the information that I'll share with you will come from that. The Model Fisheries Disaster Risk Management Plan, it does contain 4 sections. It's for disaster prevention and mitigation, disaster preparedness, which is what we're focusing on today, disaster response, and disaster recovery. So a picture of it is there, and member states can access it and use it at their wish. The definition that we use for preparedness is that persons have the knowledge, the capacities developed by government professionals and others, individuals, to respond and recover in the event that something happens, that some disaster happen. And we're focusing on hurricanes this week. So in the event that a hurricane comes up, pops up, or is in progress. And we talk about disaster preparedness, which means preparing the response of the organization, of the communities long before, right? So that when it does happen, that you have something in place that you can activate, right? And that includes planning for and training and doing drills to make sure that you understand what you're about when the event actually happens. The fishers and the fishing industry, we are quite vulnerable because not only do you lose our fishing equipment, we lose everything, meaning we lose all the investment that we would have made in assets, in boats, in gears, all of those. We also lose most of the time our homes because most of the time the fishers are right on the coast. They also, if they have a business running on the beach, they lose that as well. Also, the communities are right there, so you lose everything. You lose community, you lose home, you lose equipment, you lose everything. And so the fishing industry is, and our fishers, they're quite vulnerable. Therefore, this is highly important to us. And I look at some of the things that do happen. I just have here some stats on some of the hurricanes that would have passed through. We talk about Doran in the Bahamas, category 5, and we talk about just damages to vessels, 4.9 million. Antigua and Barbuda, we talk about 94,000 just for vessels alone. Grenada, Carriacou just happened, burial the other day, 2024. And that the total cost of just Carriacou alone was about 3.7 million that was lost in, and that did not include infrastructure. Therefore, preparedness is very important to the fishing industry. And so the important concepts at the national, because remember, we're a regional body, and so we tend not just to the national, but to the regional aspects of things as well. So important concepts at the national and regional, both at the national and regional level, is that, first of all, think about it, we must plan. And when we plan, we involve our stakeholders in planning and the decision making. Secondly, we must engage early warning systems. Thirdly, we must enhance public awareness and response capacities. Fourthly, we make clear the roles and responsibilities of individuals, organizations, different entities. And five, we must situate disaster preparedness within a holistic risk reduction context. So those are some clear concepts that we go in when we think about when we think about preparedness in the fishing industry and fishing and aquaculture industry. What are some of the best practices that we start out with in terms of individuals? We encourage our fishers, our farmers, aquaculture farmers to stay informed. They must carefully follow all the official information from authorities, and they must be informed, keep themselves up to date on what is happening in terms of the weather system. And of course, I don't have to stress this for fishers too much. They do know, because on a daily basis, you have to look at what is happening out there before you even put out your boat to go. So we encourage everybody to stay informed, especially now at this time. We encourage everybody to be aware of the risk, safeguard against hazards such as high winds and so on and so forth, heavy rainfalls and so on. And this involves taking stock of what you have, and especially where you can ensure, you make sure that you do that. And whatever you can do to safeguard your assets, you put that plan in place, have it ready so that when it's time, you can activate it. And thirdly, we encourage everybody to make a plan, as I hinted above. You make a plan, an individual plan. Yes, you have a national plan, but each person should know, each fisher should know what it is that you're doing, how you're going to secure yourself, how you're going to move your assets around, how you're going to fix yourself so that you can be protected when the time comes. Some other best practices, because we were asked specifically about securing vessels. So I just have a few here to whet your appetite. Those of you who are joining this webinar, if you want to get the full details, we have a whole section on fisheries and aquaculture on the 30th. So you'll need to come to that to hear more details and to ask all your questions. But just to give you an idea, so for vessels, we say to our fishers, identify a safe storage location. It could be dry storage. It could be a protected marina or a harbor, hurricane holes, or so on and so forth. Usually you can check with your fisheries division in your member state, and they will be able to help you with that, where it would be safe to store if it's not going to be a dry storage. Dry storage means you move it from the water and put it somewhere in a warehouse or so on where it's safe. It could also be an area that has a history of providing a safe refuge during storms, and boat could also be moved close to your house or to your building. Wherever it is that you put that boat, you need to secure it. You can fill the boat with water or sand. If it's on land, of course, if it's in water, you would know that because of course it would sink. But on land, you could fill the boat with water or sand to weigh it down. You could use tie downs, metal brackets to secure the entire unit to the ground. You could strip off and remove all loose or movable assets, etc., from the boat. Don't let what you see happening in these pictures be your boat if you're a fisherman. In terms of gears, we encourage fishers to remove fish pots and gears out of the water at the first warning. And this is to prevent ghost fishing, because once those pots or those nets or so on get cut off in the water, then they could be ghost fishing for years. Next, if you remove the boat from the water, you can also remove all the other things from the boat. So you have whatever you have on the boat, remove it, especially those things that can fly around and turn into missiles. One more slide, and this one is just a little bit about aquaculture. So securing your aquaculture facility and your aquaculture endeavors, ponds and so on, before the hurricane, we encourage people to remove your pumps and so on and store them. We ask you to feed your fingerlings and so on and ensure that you have some feed ready because after the hurricane that would be probably very hard to find. Make sure you secure your feed properly. Close down your water supply from streams, clear areas around your ponds, and afterwards clear debris in and around your aquaculture ponds. Check your water system to see if it's functioning. Remove dead fish from the ponds, very important. Transfer fish to cleaner water, etc., etc. So these are some of the practical things that you can do. And as I said before, if you want to hear the fine details and to be able to ventilate your questions properly, please join us on Friday, May 30th, where we have a section totally devoted to fishing and the fishing industry and aquaculture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. June. Those are very, very important tips you've given us. And I would now like to quickly move on. Our time is rather short. So I'd like to quickly move on. Mr. Grant. Are you there? Okay, so let us just then move on. Mr. James Pierce, good morning. He's our fourth presenter. He's from Lynch Insurance. We will be hearing about some of the products that are being offered in the region. So I'd like to, without further ado, ask him to present or to share with us, I should say, those his thoughts about this topic.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here today. Everyone, fellow panelists, viewers online, thank you very much from us here at Lynch Caribbean Insurance Brokers. As this forum, hopefully we can contribute positively to the vital effort at de-risking our agriculture and fisheries sectors. Please don't get nervous about the word de-risking, because I know here in the Caribbean, that's a bit of a buzzword with the banks who are, trying to de-risk. But nevertheless, in terms of what we do as risk managers, primarily, de-risking is a good thing because we work on behalf of the clients. Okay. What we do first and foremost is risk management, and as with any engagement, the insurance products are a secondary solution. They cost money. They're not always, the optimal solution, but nevertheless, we're going to speak extensively on them here today. And this process of risk management and the products that are available apply to any risk, climatic, economic, social, whatever. However, for the purpose of this engagement, we're going to talk specifically about hurricanes and the 2025 hurricane season, which is just around the corner, 1st of June. So whereas, this risk of hurricane, sounds very narrow, as you will see, it quickly expands into areas such as liability, economic loss. However, any sound insurance program, that starts with a sound risk management strategy, will, significantly mitigate all of the attendant risks, well, certainly the insurable ones. And let me just say that, I am excited at the fact that we have a fantastic panel here who are giving some really good advice on a lot of different risk management strategies. So I'm not going to get into that at all. I'm just going to stick to insurance products. So, the risk management process starts with or de-risking process starts with the risk identification phase, and then quickly works through the assessment, mitigation, and then the monitoring. Injecting insurance into this process invariably happens at the mitigation phase, where you're looking to now transfer that risk that you've identified over to an insurance product. And from that point of view, agriculture and fisheries are quite similar, from the point of view that you have your production assets, such as your greenhouses, which the gentleman mentioned earlier, your farm equipment. In the case of fisheries, it's your boats, your if it's aquaculture, it's your pens, your pump equipment, you name it. And traditional insurance products are readily available to help with that and to help mitigate that risk and transfer it over to the private sector, or in many cases, if it's a sovereign self-insurance product, transfer it to the state. The main thing is that what we're seeing is a pooling of risk to the point where the scale presents opportunities um, to buy into an insurance product, either self-insurance or more commonly through an insurance program. So whereas I think most of us are well versed on the traditional insurance products that are available for most risks, such as marine insurance for your hull, business interruption risk for your loss of income following an insured loss, to your production facilities, to loss of your vital pieces of equipment, etc. Here we're talking strictly hurricane. So I think the traditional insurance products have a vital role to play, whereby you can insure your greenhouses. I have a number of clients here and throughout the Caribbean who insure their greenhouses, and that is a viable option. In many cases, it is the optimum solution, because other than removing the fabric, there's not a lot else you can do. And depending on the size of the hurricane, there really is not a lot you can do with a Category 5 hurricane. Even the best greenhouse frames, a Category 5 hurricane, there's takes most things before it as it passes through. So there's only so much you can do as far as managing and mitigating the risk yourself. Outside of that, then you got to look to insurance products. Now, these products, invariably are readily available, and basically what you have to do as an insured is look at your business in a holistic way from the ground up. Walk through it with your risk manager. That, as I said, could be a competent insurance broker, or it could be a specialist appointed. A lot of our government agencies have specialists. In the case of fisheries, we are lucky to have people like CRFM, that will come in and give really good advice on, where the areas of risk lie, and point you in the direction of how to mitigate them. Once that is done and you've isolated, okay, I need to insure, my greenhouse, I need to insure my equipment, I need to insure my business against loss, contingent loss following a hurricane, that is where the insurance products and the insurance professionals can really assist. Now, outside of that, there are many areas of risk which traditionally have been uninsurable, not from the point of view of that they're illegal or immoral or against social policy, but simply because they lack scale. And I think, those are areas which, have come to the fore more recently, and where I personally have been expending a lot of my energy across the length and breadth of the Caribbean. And, we've come up with we've called it the Regional Economic Agricultural Program, or REAP for short. But that is a program that we started 3 years ago through engagement with a local government, which then expanded to the OECS, and then expanded from there onto CARICOM, and now with the blessing of the ministerial subcommittee, we've launched the product through in conjunction with CARICOM and throughout CARICOM, whereby we have a parametric insurance solution, which basically covers it is totally scalable. So whereas the level of engagement for many governments has been you know, at the level of livelihood protection for farmers and fisher folk, you know, that is something that traditionally has been out of the reach of the individual farmers simply because, or fishermen, because they just simply lack the scale to attract the interest of insurers. And then as a result, the sovereign governments have had to step in as the insurer of last resort and provide sustenance to these individuals post disaster, simply because there's no other option for these individuals, and these individuals, you know, provide over and above, you know, their personal circumstance, they provide an extremely vital role in the functioning of the small island states, such that we would have seen CARICOM, you know, in their Vision 25, one of the, you know, the key pillars of that is, you know, is not just insurance, but, you know, the becoming food dependent and food sovereignty is a, you know, a key pillar. And in order to achieve that, you got to make sure that the constituent persons involved in that are able to survive these losses, which are becoming more and more severe with climate change. You know, and so hence, you know, we were energized to look at that risk and come up with a solution, which we have. I am going to attempt to share here my screen. Hopefully, I am successful. Um, um, if the moderator could just give me a thumbs up, or otherwise that everyone can see it. This is a brief overview of the project. Can someone maybe in the chat or otherwise just let me know you're seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great, excellent. Thank you very much. All right, so just a brief overview. So the REAP project, as I said, is a basically was set up in conjunction with ourselves and our international partners at Guy Carpenter. And this was to propel the Vision 25 project to drive and transfer the risk basically from the public sector and into the private sector. Now, this project, whereas initially for practical reasons has gone down the road of being sovereign controlled, it is designed, and we have systems built into it with our technology partners at a company called Raincoat that enable us to move it at whatever pace the sovereign is interested, move it out of the public sector and into the hands of the small farmers, and that is has proven to be a huge boon in other markets such as Mexico, Argentina, etc. You know, where it has been launched and has been operating successfully for many years, whereby, and I'll get into that. You know, you move it through the use of technology, cell phones, smartphones. You know, and you know it has proven highly successful. As I said, our team is ourselves here at Lynch Caribbean, but Guy Carpenter, through their membership with the Global Marsh Network, Raincoat, the technology firm, and then with the kind assistance of CARICOM to connect us with, you know, forums such as this. You know, it really has allowed us to move to a point where, you know, we can, you know, successfully deploy it. We have had a successful deployment in a country, and they beg me not to say anything just yet because they want to make that public themselves. But we are actively engaged with 7 other countries as we speak, and 13 in total. So we have gained significant traction in the Caribbean. But outside of that, we've had successful deployments for years now in Mexico, DOMREP, you know, Puerto Rico, Argentina, you know, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, etc. You know, so it's not that we're without experience. The prior presenter would be familiar with the GK Weather Protect project in Jamaica, and that is done through our partners Guy Carpenter and Raincoat as well. So it is not something that is unfamiliar. It is just, it is now being rolled out to the entire Caribbean. What does REAP do? We're similar to other parametric products. However, we are different from the point of view that we are targeting agriculture specifically. We are ultra flexible, and I will get to that. It is not a off-the-shelf product that basically offers, coverage out of a box, take it or leave it. It is a very bespoke product whereby we engage sovereigns, through their ministries of agriculture, their extension officers, etc., and basically have a fully customized product for the particular industry, whether it be fisheries or whether it be farmers, or in the case of some countries, it be only specific farmers. So within a particular country, you may feel that you have a particular farmer that is more vulnerable than others, so you can easily choose to insure only certain segments of the farming community. If that particular crop or their particular circumstance, warrants it. So, and let me just add here, by the way, that whereas we're speaking about sovereign solutions for small, small farmers primarily, we have had engagements with very large individual companies, farm companies, whose size and scale is such that they, have attracted the appetite of insurers individually. So it is not to say that a farm could not buy insurance on their own and buy the coverage that they want, as opposed to, the coverage being offered by a national solution, which may be more focused on, livelihood protection for a small farmer, whereas a large farm may want to scale that up to provide a payout that is, it is significant enough to help them pay for their total losses arising out of a hurricane. Okay, so who the traditional beneficiaries are, as I said, are crop farmers, livestock farmers, and fisher folk. That is the current basket of constituents that we have seen the most uptake on so far in our engagements. And in terms of what can be covered, the traditional ones: drought, pests, excess rain, flood, wind, and hurricane. Let me just add here real quickly that we haven't had any serious engagements on pests yet. And whereas it can be done, and we have done it in other countries, I just want to add a caveat here that much like in the case of wind and hurricane, where the extent of coverage is clearly defined, in terms of pests, that is also clearly defined in terms of what pests insurers are prepared to cover and what pests that they're not prepared to cover. So I don't, please don't take away from this that it's a carte blanche coverage for any crop loss due to pests. Basically, the three-step process is to define with the partner the variables and the restrictions related to the product, develop a model and calibrate the results, and then finally implement the model and provide visibility and transparency for everyone concerned. In terms of the variables and the definition, we start with defining the perils that are sought to be covered. So, for example, if I had an engagement, for example, in Guyana, it is unlikely that Guyana would want to purchase coverage for a hurricane, for example. Whereas they may be more inclined to look at coverage based on rainfall or lack thereof. Then we look at the return periods that coverage is being sought for, as well as the expected price of those. The sum insured is defined by the engagement, and then the product granularity, is also looked at in terms of the extent of the coverage and how what geographical, etc. Area of coverage is required. Agricultural activity and phenology features highly in there, simply to help whereas, that would not affect the coverage per se. It would affect the motivation from the farmers and their ministry as to what type of coverage they think is relevant to them. The objective of the cover and the distribution mechanism is then looked at as well. And by objective, what I mean is, are we looking to cover for example, the basic livelihood of the farmers post loss for, let's say, 6 months, 12 months, whatever? Or are we looking to cover, some additional funds to help replant, whether it be plant stock, fertilizer, etc.? Everything has a cost. So obviously, adding to the cover, whether in terms of the sum insured or the coverage period, then will affect that. And then IT integration is looked at, and then depending on the territory and how advanced the constituent members are, would help determine how deep that integration goes, whether it goes just to the government or does it feed all the way down, like for example in Mexico, where the constituent farmers, they purchase their own level of coverage within a group scheme just through an app on their phone. So it's and then when claims are paid, similarly are paid directly into their bank account. So all of this is possible, but again, it comes after extensive engagement and looking at what is available and what the position is on the ground.
Thanks, James. Thanks so much for the information. We're kind of running out of time.
Sure.
I don't know if you have.
And we could talk a lot more. Sorry. Okay.
Okay, you're good. All right.
Yes,
So thank you so much, James, for that
Sure.
presentation.
Thank you.
Very, again, valuable, some very great information coming here. I'd like to ask Mr. Grant, are you there? Can you please, you can now make your presentation.
Yeah.
Hi, good morning. Hello.
Morning. I can hear you.
Hello.
Yes, good morning.
Can you hear me? I'm trying to bring up my camera. I'm not so text again. Are you seeing me?
Yes, we are.
Yes. All right, wonderful. I am Darren Grant, and I am the Chief Executive Officer for the Jamaica Agricultural Society. As a matter of fact, this morning I am actually at the Centre Agriculture Show, which is being organized by the Jamaica Agricultural Society as well. And I was listening to the presentations, and it is important. Well, I find it interesting that at this time we are having this conversation. Last year in particular, for Jamaica, was probably one of the worst years that has ever been experienced by our farmers. And why I said that is that we started the year with extremely dry weather. And we were wondering how is it that we're going to be going through the summer, especially in early of March, we were dealing with drought conditions. And in July, first ever, we have had the earliest ever hurricane that is ever recorded in history in Jamaica, Hurricane Beryl. And subsequent to that, we had rains for almost the entire year, almost every day for the entire year. And in November, we were struck again with a tropical storm, Raphael, sorry. And after Raphael, we had continuous rain, which pose a lot of risk to our members and the farmers as well. So it is important that conversations such as these are had. And I think it is more timely. So I want to thank the organizers for inviting me, in addition to putting together this webinar. Now I have 4 points that I would want to have conversation around. And the first one, well, the question is, what do you see as being important to farmers as they prepare for the upcoming hurricane season? And I try my best to be as practical as possible. So I look at one, when entering the hurricane season, information, accuracy, and timeliness of information is very important. And those information are important. Information is important. Getting the information to our farmers in a timely manner, and the type of information and how we communicate it is very important. Why I say that? And I'll use the most recent Hurricane Beryl, as an example. A lot of the farmers, even though they know that an impending hurricane was coming, the information as to where to access the services, or where is it post-hurricane services will be made available to them, were not adequately available to all the farmers. And that is something that we need to address. The second thing that I found to be a concern for the farmers is, how do we manage those produce that are in the field, especially for the more vulnerable, the smaller and more vulnerable farmers? How do we manage the produce that are close to maturity that they have in the field? So it speaks volumes to the availability of proper storage facility to accommodate those, because during that time, the market is not in a position to adequately absorb all those produce at the time. And in some cases, some of these produce are not ready for the market, but they can be reaped because they're at a stage where they are mature. The second thing, and I heard the conversation about greenhouses and getting them prepared and removing the plastic, but even the task of removing the plastics as well is also a challenge, as sometimes, and I speak for Jamaica, that the availability of labor is a challenge. And in driving here this morning, I was thinking that as an organization, we need to look at how is it that we're going to train competent persons that can offer those services, because we have a lot of females who are now into greenhouse production, and sometimes when an impending hurricane, the availability of competent persons to remove the plastic properly, especially for those in greenhouse, is just not available. One of the challenges that we faced, which was a major one after Hurricane Beryl, was the availability of inputs for planting. There was absolutely no seeds at one point that was available for planting. And that is something that probably this webinar could discuss, in terms of having a minimum amount of seeds available to be planted after an impending disaster. And we found that that resulted in farmers having challenging in getting back into production speedily, because the planting materials, we had to wait extended period for those to be shipped in. So the reality is that we now have to plan at the beginning of a hurricane season to look at those a minimum number of seeds or inputs that should be on the island as we approach the hurricane season. The other concerns are what we think is important is the planning, the recovery process, and the management of the recovery process. Because we have found out that after the disaster, then there's the recovery process sometimes is not organized, or if it is organized, the predominant issue is with getting back the farmers in production and not forecasting. When we have when we focus on production, in most cases, within 3 or 4 months after the disaster, then there's this oversupply of particular produce in the market, which then have a counter effect on the productiveness of the farmers. So planning ahead, managing the recovery process is going to be a vital part of it. Even in my organization, it is now being a conversation that we are now having in terms of planning and managing the recovery process a little bit better. So as I said before, the 4 areas in answering the question, what do you see as being important to farmers as they prepare for the upcoming hurricane season is one, getting the information to the farmers in a format that they can understand and ready. And what are those post-harvest facilities that will be available, and where are they, and how should they access these facilities? How to manage the inputs that are ready, that are mature in the field, and to have adequate storage. Those are concerns. And thirdly, to look at the availability of inputs within the market prior to entering the hurricane season, so as to prevent a lag in the planting and or the recovery effort. And fourth, to look at the management of the recovery process so that we do not have issues down the road with oversupply. So those are the areas that I think of great concern to us going into the hurricane season. Some of them
Thank
are
you.
outside of the purview.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Grant. We're running out of time. It's already, the hour has already passed. Well spent, I must add. Thank you so much again, Mr. Grant. At this time, I'd like to call upon our final presenter, Dr. Jem Thomas Barry. She is a scientist and agronomist at the Caribbean Agriculture Research and Development Institute. And the time is now yours.
Okay, sorry about that. I had some problems unmuting my mic for some reason.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So my apologies. All right. So good morning again. A good day to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I am Dr. Jem Thomas Barry from CADI, and I'll be presenting on disaster preparation for on-farm equipment and assets, which is quite similar to the first present, right? So in disaster planning, it's essential to understand that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. As mentioned previously by the other colleagues who presented as well. Strategies must be guided by a structured decision-making framework. So first, the most important thing, which is sometimes overlooked, is life safety. So your most important asset is your life and the lives of your family and workers. Everything else is secondary. Okay. It's also critical to understand the nature of the impending disaster and the associated risk. So knowing whether you'll be facing a tropical storm or a Category 3 hurricane will influence your preparation. For reference, a Category 3 hurricane and higher can generate winds strong enough to overturn a tractor, whereas a storm may not. There are other factors to consider, things like rainfall intensity and duration. There are things you should also look at. So for example, will it be a storm surge or a sea blast? Now, these things can accelerate corrosion in machinery. Another key part of the preparation process will also include conducting a farm asset risk assessment. So this means that you should take an inventory of your assets and evaluate the specific risks that they face. So for example, you need to know, okay, do I have certain equipment, or these equipments located in a flood-prone area? Within the decision-making framework, there are some guiding questions you should also consider, right? So firstly, you should ask yourself, what pieces of equipment are most critical for starting my operation without placing myself in debt? And this question really helps you identify and prioritize essential tools and machinery that directly impact production and income generation. Secondly, you should also ask yourself what capital investments are required to protect these critical assets given the circumstances. And here, this question is more focused on risk mitigation to ensure that you're protecting your most valuable assets. And thirdly, one should always ask, what are the significant inputs and assets resources needed for my production system? Now, this is also a vital part of your disaster preparedness strategy because it is not only about the assets that you currently possess, but also about anticipating the resources and assets you will need to recover quickly and resume operation. So let's get into it. So some practices for securing large machinery, you will want to relocate equipment like tractors to low-lying shelter areas away from flood-prone zones or exposure to sea spray. Now, ideally, that can be behind a windbreak or inside a sturdy shed. For large machinery, you might also want to lower the center of gravity by adding wheel weights or by adjusting mounted implements to keep the weight closer to the ground. And this practice is particularly important for equipment that is prone for tipping over, especially on uneven terrains. You'll also want to secure equipment using ground anchor, specifically designed for heavy equipment. And here is an image illustrating what this anchor looks like and how they can be effectively implemented. So for smaller equipment and other assets, particularly those that use battery, the first thing you want to do is disconnect any batteries, disconnect any sensitive electronics and control panels, and protect by covering with waterproof covering. You fill all fluid tanks completely to minimize moisture accumulation and ensure that they are securely sealed, right? You also want to store things like your fertilizers and your input. You want to prevent them from moisture damage, and you do so in waterproof containers off the ground. Preferably, we will recommend plastic and not metal containers because certain chemicals, even fertilizers like ammonia nitrate, can be reactive to metals. Okay. Clear drainage ditch and gutters to ensure that rainfall runoff is directed away from buildings and structure, and where possible, trim overhanging trees and branches. So I know my first presenter, I'll talk a little bit about sheds and stuff, but I'll just go briefly in the interest of time. So for infrastructure like sheds, you want to reinforce the area using hurricane straps and metal connection at joints to the structure to ensure stability. You want to secure all windows with storm shutters to protect against wind-blown debris. Now reinforce doors with diagonal bracing or horizontal bars to resist racking forces and to prevent them from being blown open. And this here is an illustration of what that will look like. Additionally, you want to create little cracks or vents on windows on the leeward side. And that's the side away from the prevailing wind. And this will help equalize both the internal and external air pressure during high wind events. This is important because it reduces the risk of the roof being lifted off. Again, on infrastructure, briefly, if you have greenhouse and strong winds are expected, it is recommended that you remove the plastic in advance. And here we are showing two examples of systems that allow for easy removal of the plastic. We have what we call the snap clamp system, which when released can quickly roll up. And we have also the locking profile. I think the first presenter also talked about that. This is a picture showing the locking profile. Using this profile, it can easily be pulled out or detached. The plastic can be easily detached with minimum effort, right? For crops, so crops grown in pots or seedling trays, such as in greenhouse or nurseries, you want to secure them in a protective shed. A good advice is to avoid fertigation, and that is applying water and nutrients to open field crops immediately before a storm or a heavy rainfall. And this helps prevent fruit splitting and early decomposition. It is also advised to apply some biostimulants rich in betaines after very heavy rainfall. as they tend to promote root recovery and help reduce post-storm stressing plans. So for farmers who have livestock, ensure animals are tagged and records are current to aid in recovery if they go missing. You will also want to move your animals to higher ground or elevated sheds in flood-prone areas, as well as secure movable equipment like your feeders, your waterers, which may fly around and become hazards during the case of a disaster. So far we focus primarily on the physical and structural preparedness. Let's look a little bit more on the administrative strategies, right? So like a presenter or like our insurance presenter who are presented on length on insurance, it's important to ensure that you are covered and you have current and comprehensive coverage, including protection for both equipment, your crops, livestock, and farm infrastructure. You want to maintain both digital and physical copies of essential farm documents and an up-to-date inventory. Now, this last point is very important, although most farmers don't really do it, but it's extremely important. We saw the importance of it in Grenada, in particular after Hurricane Beryl. But it's important to inform the appropriate agricultural authorities, such as local extension office or Ministry of Agriculture, and ensure that an official record of your farm assets and operational details is on file to support post-disaster assessment as well as assistance, right? And finally, preparedness is also about identifying the operational assets needed for quick recovery. So you want to ensure that you have emergency supplies, so things like extra power supplies, a reliable water source for your animal and for even irrigation. And this can be achieved by utilizing tanks or sealed water storage systems. You want to make sure you have extra battery, extra fluid, maybe extra fertilizer in the case the country might be down for a little while, transportation may be blocked for a little while, and also some protective gear to ensure safety during recovery efforts. All right, so this is it. Thank you very much for your attention. Hand you over to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thomas Barry. So we're at the end, but we have a few questions. I think we can't go without at least addressing some of them. So let me just quickly ask of the panelists to okay, so there's a question here. What are the recommendations for securing water catchment elements for water containers or crops and greenhouses? I guess Mr. Rowe or Dr. Barry would be able to assist us in answering this question.
You may need to repeat the question, please.
Okay, so we have what are the recommendations for securing water catchment elements or water containers for crops and greenhouses?
Doc, I don't know what you make of the word element being used here. Water catchment element. So I don't know if that person is speaking about securing the gutters that run from the greenhouses to the reservoirs. I really don't understand the question entirely. I don't know, Doc, what's your take on it?
Likewise, I might take maybe the gutterants. I'm not sure as well, but I can say in support of you during your presentation that if you do have things like storage tanks and stuff, the best thing to do is to fill them with water and to make sure that they are on a steady platform, so that you will not be driven away by the wind, blown away by the wind. As the gutterants and stuff like that, if they can be removed, well, that's, that could be an option, but that is it for me. I don't know if you have any other recommendations. You can go ahead.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Okay, there's a question here for Lynch Insurance. Just give me 1 second. Mhm. Right. So I'd like, so the question is basically asking for further contact for Lynch Insurance. So if you could also provide some more contact information, that would be appreciated.
Sure. Should I put this in the chat? I mean, you know,
Yes, yes, that will be
because it's going
helpful
to
as
be
well.
email addresses, yeah, telephone numbers, all kind of
Right,
stuff. So
right. Yes, please.
I will do that. Sure. Okay.
Hi, so Ria has a question. You may go ahead and ask your question.
So my name is Joseph from Solution.
Sorry. Hi,
Let
hi,
me begin by saying thank you to all you guys.
hi, Ria.
Yeah.
The connection seems to be interrupted.
You can hear me?
You're not clear.
Okay, let me try. Can you hear me now? No, you probably can't.
It's very distorted. The issue is that it's very distorted.
It's very distorted.
Yes, you can hardly make out what you say.
I'll have to try and join from microphone. You still can't hear me?
Cannot make out a thing you're saying. Hearing you very loudly, but cannot make out a word you're saying.
All right. Well, we'll give him some time to sort that out. Another question here we got is, first of all, they're saying the topic is really interesting. What is the most efficient way to give these cautionary announcements in places with difficult access to ITCs to receive news? So how can we get the news out there on another platform?
Radio.
Mr. Grant, would you like to take that one, please? Mr. Grant, are you there still?
I think my Jamaican colleague is actually in the middle of something as he was at a show. But probably from my limited knowledge, you probably want to go back to the days when we had town criers. Persons just drive around for a little while, because outside of an electronic connection, I think it have to be something as physical and practical as that. Thank you.
If I may jump in here, Peter Morris, CRFM Secretariat. One of the things in a previous life of mine we found is that radio is still a reasonably viable mechanism for communicating information. So even though people may not have access to the more modern internet and these things, but good old AM radio seems to be something that can work for sharing information.
Justin?
Okay, thank you. Dr. Jam, would you like to also give your views here?
Well, I also like to support my other colleagues who answer the question, I think adequately answer the question. Also, maybe I want to add a WhatsApp. I know WhatsApp may need some connections, but in the event that WhatsApp telephone lines are not really down, from my knowledge, that a lot of farmers tend to use that as a good source for getting information. And almost everybody have some kind of phone device that in which they use, irrespective of ages. So that could also be added to the list if connection is available.
Thank you. Ms. June, what do you say? What's your take on this? Thank you so much for so far. But Ms. June, we'd also like to hear from you.
Totally agree with all the colleagues before me, and just to add as well that the town crier, it still works in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It's used quite effectively. radio, and also if it's not at like for example, if the storm is due a day after, television is still quite news, 7 o'clock news, 7:30 news is also still very much in play. Most households still sit down to watch the news in the evening. So that's another avenue. So radio, effective, WhatsApp, effective, town crier, effective, and add television to the mix as well. Thanks.
All right, great. I see Ria. He joined. He. Are you now ready
Yep.
to present your question?
Yep. Good afternoon. So just so I repeat it in case no one was able to hear, I guess no one was able to. My name is Ryan Joseph. So I'm a St. Lucian. I'm not a farmer, but I appreciate you guys sharing all that information because I am interested as a St. Lucian who's currently working in the U.S. In the Gulf states on most of a lot of utility resilience projects. And as a St. Lucian, every time I kind of oversee this problem that we look at, I'm able to identify, well, the data shows it's coming from the Caribbean. And we were looking at this stuff 2-3 years ago. Preparedness is being prepared in terms of resilience as well. We have to look at how we construct things, not just for tomorrow or what's coming next year, but what's coming in the next 5 years. The 100-year hurricane is not the 100 years anymore. It's gone from a 1% chance of happening within a year to much higher than that. And one of the first presenters spoke about how we construct things, and that is the first step. It is constructing things that is resilient, and the money is there. I believe CARICOM has funds for small business owners to look at, accessing those funds to resilify their systems, their farm systems. And one thing is, like we spoke about, is awareness of this information. In St. Lucia, a lot of our agriculture labor is our older generation. So to me, we should communicate notifications through all avenues, whether it's radio, town crier. But how important is the information? When does the information come? What does the information include? The hurricanes start developing in the Caribbean, and that gives the Caribbean very little time to make adjustments. So we should be looking, and the data is out there. We need to be able to pay more attention to the data and be able to provide that to the people so that we start developing stuff that's going to last not next year or being surprised. The data is out there. We can look at it. We can decide how many hurricanes, the volume, the intensity, and stuff like that, just based on what's previously happened. Another comment from the first presenter is, are things being built to spec? Who's deciding when we can construct a greenhouse or how it can be constructed? We need to have a format for spec that needs to be seen by someone with a background in constructing structures that are resilient. Before we can focus on insuring things, we need to ensure that they don't fall, because we'll spend way more time, even though resiliency, building resilient structures are cost up front. That's what kind of deters people from it. If we can show data for why it's important, then we can kind of make it more attractive to spend the money, right? We need to engineer better solutions as well, not just look at how can we always be prepared. Resiliency is something that we should all be concerned about. And it was just an interesting topic, and I just hope to say that, are we looking at not just being prepared, but being resilient? It will continue to get worse, and we need to be able to look at what other places are doing, how they're doing it, to become more resilient, to resilify our food security, as things become worse, because food will become more expensive. The agriculture force is becoming older, and it's not looking attractive to the young people. But it's security. It's never going to go away, and it's facing challenges. We need to use data to fix our solutions. And that's just my thoughts on it.
If I may jump in here in hot pursuit,
Hi.
one of the interesting challenges is getting across the socio-cultural barrier.
Thanks so much. We're really way beyond our time. Thank you for your question. Thank you for your insightfulness. Dr. Mori, I'm so sorry, but we really are sorry, Mr. Mori. We're beyond our time. But do hold on. We do have more coming up. So next week, Friday, same time, same place. We will be looking at disaster preparedness for crops, open field, and protected systems. So do come back. Our presenters, I want to thank you greatly. You've done a great job. I think the feedback that we've been seeing is all positive, and they all very much appreciate the information you shared. So well done, and thank you so much. We look forward to working with you guys in the future. And for everyone who joined in, thank you for being a part of this. And I do hope that you shared information. This webinar will be available online. So at the CARICOM Secretariat, we have a YouTube channel. You can always check there and go back to all these recordings. This is just one of many. So do look out for them and do join. And we want to thank you all. So have a great day. Enjoy lunch. If it's lunchtime, enjoy your lunch. For everyone, have a great day. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye, folks.